Welcome to the Total Wireless Store, where total confidence awaits.
I am done dealing with data overages.
Don't worry, you got this at the Total Wireless Store. Bring your number and get 15 gigs of data for $50 on the nation's best 4G LTE network. And during our 50% more data promotion, you'll actually get 22.5 gigs for the same price.
22.5 for 50? That's a gig deal.
Data it is.
Discover the Total Wireless Stores and get total confidence. The latest phones, the best network, all at great prices. Ends January 2nd, 2019. Excludes ports from TracFone Wireless Inc. brands. Terms at TotalWireless.com.
Aloha and welcome to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kier-Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, and other co-hosts, Karen Christine Patrick and John Polk. And today we are interviewing the doctors, JJ and Desiree Hurtak. And let me tell you a little bit about them before we pull them into the show. They are the founders of the Academy for Future Science, which is futurescience.org, an international non-governmental organization that works to bring cooperation between science and consciousness. Dr. J.J. Hurtak is the author of numerous books, including The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, translated into 30 languages, and The End of Suffering that he co-authored with his colleague, physicist Russell Targ. He has a Ph.D. from the University of California and a second Ph.D. from the University of Minnesota. Together, the Hurtaks have written several books, including their latest book entitled Over Self-Awakening, the 72 names and the myriad names of the Divine Mother, and their most recent book co-authored with Dr. Elizabeth Brasher entitled Mind Dynamics. They are respected archaeologists, having worked both in Mexico and Egypt, and were part of the team that uncovered the infamous tomb of Osiris on the Giza Plateau. They've spoken out regarding extraterrestrial contact for over 40 years, and Dr. J.J. Hurtak was one of the speakers at the first International Congress on UFOs in Acapulco, Mexico in 1977. They are both well known for their inspirational music, the most recent CD being Sacred Names, Sacred Codes with collaborative music by Stephen Halpern, and their graphic films such as Macabre and The Light Body, from which they have won over 14 national and international awards, and their latest graphical film is called Gates of Light. So, Dr. Lesson, would you like to say something? Well, before I pass this to Dr. Lesson, I have an extensive bio and pictures and information on the Hurtaks on aquarianradio.com. Please, listeners, do go over there and check it out.
Are they online, honey?
Go ahead and talk while I see.
Okay. Well, anyway, what I intend to ask of them is what's been plaguing me is there seems to be in the extraterrestrial investigative community those who have an apocalyptic vision of where we're going as a planetary species, and those who think ascension's coming. Some that say, well, some are going to go for apocalypse, boom, boom, die, and some are going to go hallelujah, ascension, and kumbaya. And so it's really interesting. And, of course, without our time frame at all, maybe we've already experienced both alternatives as we put our mind waves into it. We're just ghosting back to the present. And if we identify with the largest fractal within us of the metacosmic void, then, of course, we created the situation we're in now. And this is the best and the worst possible of worlds at this moment, in every moment, and I'd really like to hear what our guests have to say about that.
All right, I'm still working to get them on.
I'll give something else then. Okay.
Let me get on Karen. And okay, you say
hello. Okay, so what, Karen, what I would like you and John and Janet too, and me to do is to say who you are, to state your existential statement about your life and its meaning and your attributes and characteristics in thumbnail form. Who are you?
Okay, I'll go. My name is Karen Christine Patrick. I live in New Mexico with my family and our 2 dogs. And who am I? I'm a multidimensional being having a monodimensional experience, I think. And I'm with you, Sasha, on what if they called an apocalypse and nobody came? I mean, the other day I was listening to somebody talking about doom and gloom, and I grew up on doom and gloom. I'm like a second-generation conspiracy theorist, so it was pretty bleak. Even as a young person, I thought I wasn't even going to grow up. And not only that, did I grow up, but I became a grandmother. So I just decided no, I don't give permission for there to be an apocalypse. I would prefer definitely the ascension option, and that's where I try to keep my mindset and my research to be encouraging to people. So thank you. That's me.
Woo! Thanks. John.
John, are you there? Welcome to the show.
Yes, I'm here. So who am I?
John, who are you?
I'm very much like everybody on the panel tonight. I'm a lifelong experiencer. I'm living a life of service for the greater good. I'm here to proliferate the universal cosmic message. I'm here to not just educate myself, but try to inform others about the reality that, extraterrestrials created our civilization, seeded our civilization, tampered with our DNA, et cetera, of course, the Anunnaki are major players in this whole pantheon of gods and elite councils in the cosmos that are dictating what's going on in the heavens, as above, so below. And I'm just, here to spread the message, and I'm, very happy and privileged to be a part of Aquarian Radio every Friday night on the Experiencer's Path.
Cool. Okay, Janet, you want to go next? So who are you, Janet?
I am a computer tech trying to get our guests on today, and we're having difficulty. Besides that, I am a female humanoid. I've incarnated in a female humanoid body, and I'm alive in the 21st century on the planet Earth. I'm also a multidimensional being that simultaneously exists on many levels and many dimensions and many realms and vibratory frequencies, and it's really difficult maintaining all these sub-personalities of myself sometimes. And sometimes it's very easy, depending on which sub-personality has the ball and is operating the whole system. But basically, I'm enjoying this existence and its variations on the theme, and every day I wake up and ask myself who I am and why am I here, what's going on, and I contemplate reality, and I come up with various answers, and each day is the best of times and the worst of times. And I think we have the Hurtak here. So with that, we're pausing, and let me click them on, and welcome to the show.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. We called into you, right.
First of all, we want to thank you for having us on. We've had problems with our phone service here in California.
Yeah, but also both sides. So thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. Of course, we're here to also support Contact in the Desert, which is a great program going to be in Southern California in mid-May.
And there'll be an illustrious list of speakers, as all of you know, who've been following the Contact in the Desert events. We're familiar with most of them. We've worked with Robert Schoch. We've worked behind the scenes also in Egypt and Japan, South America, with colleagues, Robert Bevell and others, prominent speakers. So we're very pleased to be on this talk show this evening.
Well, we're delighted to have you, and we've read your bio. We have an extensive page up on Aquarian Radio, and we're very interested in learning more, our listeners especially, learning more about your work, and especially what your research has taught you and where we are now. I saw you, Dr. Hurtak, JJ, I saw you back in 1993 or 4, maybe 5, in Honolulu and Hawaii, and that impressed me, and I never forgot and I'm delighted to be talking to you, 20-some years later. And we are too, Dr. Les and I are also presenting at Contact in the Desert, and we're very honored that they've invited us. And these are very exciting times. So could you tell us, summarize, I know all these years of work, and there's two of you, so probably over 100 years of work between the two of you, what you gathered about this existence, this life, and what's going on here. And take it away.
Well, let me start out by explaining that I've been trained both in anthropology, archaeology, in linguistics, as well as cosmology. I have several doctor's degrees. My wife and I, we speak on at least 9 or 10 different subjects connecting the points of human civilization. And as you look back at man's rise in civilization, you will see that there are key points of quantum change or major awakening, and we're at such a point right now, which I describe as our destiny in space. We're beginning to realize, with all of this information coming from historic sources, from the indigenous traditions of Africa and South and Central America, as well as reports from astronauts and others who've been in space, that we're not alone in the universe. We're living in a fantastic universe, beaming with life, and now it's our options to go from a culture of death and violence to a culture of peace and transition or transformation. And so this is the bottom line. We have, shall we say, a short period of time to increase the dialogue with the public commons on a positive level before we fall back into the next round of the war scenario syndrome, which drives humanity to the brink of complete destruction. We are in a fantastic moment of history of putting the pieces together, and this has been our work.
Right, and I think in addition to that, we're excited about new evidence coming out mostly by scientists all over the world, one of which recently was released talking about the fact that Kennewick Man, which is one of the ancient fossils found in North America, really is Native American, not Chinese, and that means that man has been, even in the New World, North America, for more than 13,000 years, probably something like 50,000 plus years.
Right.
So this is exciting. This is coming up. And, we've been, of course, as you mentioned, to Hawaii, and you have great little pyramids all over. We've been to the one, of course, on Maui, and there's others on Oahu as well. So there's a lot of ancient culture that has gone unappreciated, that looked to the stars, that understood the higher levels of beings that exist in the universe. We've also been to Easter Island, seeing those amazing situations there. So we'd like to cover some of that on your show today.
So I wanted to add also that we had the opportunity some years ago in Chile to be at Monteverde talking with anthropologists who came up with artifacts showing that human society existed some 30,000 years ago, made small tools but also toys with wheels. This was incredible information that the university scholars we were in dialogue with were told not to publish because it would shake up the whole concept of human evolution going back more than 12,000 years. But putting the pieces together, we realized that we are at a point now of writing a whole new textbook of human evolution, connecting with what we call a higher cosmic evolution, a higher intelligent life form that is preparing us, the human race, for a great evolutionary transformation.
So I guess we can go round robin with questions, and there's a lot of questions that just came up with what you just said. But what I'm wondering from your cosmology, your perspective, is who was what species or beings were directing all this? Dr. Les and I come from the Anunnaki, Zechariah Sitchin, and other researchers in that line perspective, and we've been digging through that and connecting the dots from that perspective. But then we realize there are many more ancient species. I mean, there are many species that have intervened, even going back millions, if not billions of years on this planet. So it's been a continual series of kind of like, what do we call it? Interventionism is what Lloyd Pike called interventionism. So who do you think was the one that was designing humanity and the species and coming in here? Was it one species, many different cultures? Who was in here terraforming the planet and doing the genetic experiments on humanity, from your perspective?
Right. Well, basically, I think you were right when you said many different. I mean, it seems that in the billions of years ago, millions of years ago, especially in the time of the dinosaurs, maybe 650,000 years ago, or
no,
even
I'm talking about millions of years ago, 60-plus millions of years ago.
Right. That you had maybe some reptilian type of intelligences that were controlling the show, and then that shifted. And it shifted to different species that then started to try to upgrade this planet. It was pretty much the planet itself that was the choice, with the water and with the environment that was developing, that other species wanted to come here and live. And, of course, there was evolution on some levels, but we also feel that there was really more, people, intelligences coming to visit the planet, both from all sides. And we look at the Mayans and the Egyptians, who both talked about Orion as being a key level of intelligence that came to planet Earth.
A key source of what we would call higher cosmic intelligence. Not to oversimplify, I think the question really requires a whole new scientific discipline, looking at the varieties of the cosmic others who are now visiting the planet. I've seen in my research evidence of more than 54 different races, and in my conversation with Paul Hellyer, former defense minister of Canada, he privately admitted that there were at least 5 different extraterrestrial races currently interacting with the human race. Much of this, of course, is in the area of what is called the black archives, only for the very gifted few who look at this from the standpoint of national security and issues dealing with the survival of the human race. And so in the context of all arguments that the human race was not really prepared to accept the fact that we are being visited by a variety of different races from outer space, this has created a vacuum. And into this vacuum, a lot of pseudoscientists have postulated 2 or 3 groups from this constellation or that. Our position is one of an open-ended universal paradigm where we are interacting with several scores of intelligent life forms. Their descriptions, all of the physiological, linguistic details, will have to come out of a group or a consortium of key engineers, scientists, anthropologists, and astronomers who have looked at the big picture. No one person can speak on behalf of humanity on such a critical issue of who's on first base or who are the leading forces. Though, as my wife just said, if you look at the anthropological context of the ancient Egyptian archives and also those of the Mayan and pre-Mayan, they point to that constellation we generally associate with Orion or Orion's belt as being the mysterious place or the door to the higher designer or the creator force behind life as we define it.
And, of course, Dr. Hurtak is best known for his book in the 70s, The Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch. And in there it talks about also the Pleiades being a key location for the source of a lot of our own genetic code that then went around the universe, not just, of course, to this planet. So the Pleiades, we would say, in Orion are some of the key places.
Dr. Lesson wants to say something. I just wanted to add before I pass the talking stick to Dr. Lesson is that I'm a lifelong experiencer, and I interview and interact with many experiencers, and it appears that there is a huge volume of interactions with many different species. I myself was personally taken to a meeting with 100,000 unique individual species, no 2 alike at the meeting, and that was on purpose. So Dr. Lesson wants to add something.
Well, it's just I've been interviewing Stuart Swerdlow, who used to be an agent for the Montauk Project, and he got to see at least the CIA's idea of that the first 2 continents to arise from the watery planet as the comet that became Venus passed raised Lemuria, which the surviving Dracos, reptilians, occupied, and their beef was the dinosaurs, and Atlantis, which the Atlans settled, and the dinosaurs became a hazard to the Atlans, and they bombed Lemuria and Hawaii and Easter Island and so forth. The tips, as Swerdlow says, of what was left, and things happened that Atlantis was sunk too. But in any case, the Andromedans called, Stewart says, the Council of Hatona, at which it was agreed that a basic humanoid would be created, and the different races that had control of different areas of Earth could work more on the genetics and the conditioning of their creatures. And so 12 humanoid races and one reptilian race contributed to our base genetics, and that's our brainstem. Anyway, I'd like you guys to relate to that to square those ideas.
All right, first of all, I was able to be scientific advisor to the Japanese underwater team that went into Yonaguni. That area is the southernmost part of Japan, approximately 75 kilometers from Taiwan. Back in the 90s, we did underwater diving, and the evidence does suggest that there was at one time, with the Japanese calling their traditions, the motherland of Mu, which some equate with the continent of Lemuria from the European perspective. And we saw in 6 different locations temples and pyramidal type forms of engineering that could not have come through natural phenomena or tectonic movements or even ocean dynamics. These were clear standing forms that would be, shall we say, geometrically equivalent of ancient temples that a previous race on the Japanese islands had created for reasons yet to be defined. In any event, the evidence suggests that the planet has gone through several shifts, geophysical changes, in which case a lot of these temples and artifacts have been lost.
Right. If we go back, which we do, to the ancient book of Enoch, that's a book that's from the Ethiopic documents and was also found in some part in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, it says very clearly, that there was some manipulation of the genetic seed upon this planet. We're saying in more recent times, we'll say, 10, 12, maybe 36,000 years ago, but that actually the last flood, which is interesting that we're talking about all the cycles of change, that the actual last flood actually brought back an original code structure. And we agree with that, which is more of what we call the Adamic species. Now, that does not mean that other things were happening prior to that time. Obviously, they were. But we do feel that the code structure, according to the Keys of Enoch, that we have today is really more in alignment with the Pleiades and with Orion. So that's basically the philosophy that Dr. Hurtak put out in the 1970s, actually, in his book, The Keys of Enoch.
So at that time, I published a map showing 12 areas of the world where there had been interaction with what we will call extraterrestrial cultures in a much earlier period of human history or prehistory. And since that time, in 1973, approximately 8 of the 12 locations that are in the map of Key 215 or Chapter 215 have been validated by underwater researchers, oceanographers, anthropologists who have been operating in Indonesia, Japan, in areas of East Africa, and more recently in South America. So Desiree and I have put together a roadmap directing our attention to the fingerprints of the Elohim, or the architects of earlier cycles of evolution.
Right, and we're also, one of the things pointed out in the Keys of Enoch is an island called Flores, Flores, and this is over near Yonaguni, near Taiwan, in that area. And that's where we also found the Homo florensis, which are the little hobbit people that were living, we'll say, about 100,000 plus years ago. And it's interesting that that's pinpointed. So obviously there were other civilizations. In fact, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that just this last week, which is so exciting, that in Nature, which is, of course, one of the top British
scientific journals,
there was published that they believe in San Diego, California, because they were investigating some mastodon bones, that there's a good chance that the mastodon bones were so arranged by humans. Now, when they dated those mastodon bones, they're saying that it could be as old as 130,000 years ago. So they're placing the possibility, and of course this is still up for grabs, that man could have been in the area of San Diego at least 50 to 130,000 years ago. And this is what some of the work is going on now with archaeologists from University of Washington and other who are looking at this.
So since we're doing this for Contact in the Desert, we would ask the public interested to come to Contact in the Desert events in Southern California, and you can see the maps and the evidence that we've been able to catalog and put some of this on film, including a testament by astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who says that he knows of 4 different extraterrestrial races that do exist.
It's interesting that in Sitchin's works, Prince Marduk was at one point, for having engineered the killing of his brother Dumuzi, he was exiled to North America, probably to East Lake, New York, because there's Anunnaki, strong Anunnaki haploid type, which is the same as the stuff you'd find in people from Haran in the old days. So there's evidence even in the Anunnaki stuff when they were building an alternate spaceport before the nuking in 2025 BCE. They had built an alternate spaceport at Tiwanaku, and about 50,000 years before that, Thoth was supposed to have gone to Teotihuacan in Mexico and just started gold mining there too.
Right. So that the finding in California ties in with the story, the mythology, or the ultimate history story of how the Anunnaki went all over the place. But they purposely eliminated or overlooked the information about other species. I think the victors of the war tell the story, and I think the Anunnaki were just telling their story because they didn't want to really talk about the other species. But in the Emerald Championship post, he talked about the other species that came into the council and took over the council members, and they were rather interdimensional, and they had the ability to possess people. So what would you say about all that?
Well, first of all, Michael Tillinger is going to be there at the conference. I know him personally from South Africa. We've also explored similar areas of what he claims to be heavy Anunnaki influence. He's looking at a slave culture that was created to work with the minerals, the precious metals, et cetera, et cetera. But we need to look at the big picture, I would say post-Sitchin, to look at the larger picture from the indigenous people who've been completely overlooked in many areas, particularly those in South America, as our other guest has just said. At Tiwanaku in the Bolivian highlands at 14,000 feet, you find these interesting architectural forms showing pneumatic technology perhaps was used to shape them at such a high elevation. Again, everything is up for grabs. We're coming into an area where we have to have people, though, who've done serious field research. In other words, who've been out there, as we have, for 40 years, working with the indigenous cultures, doing the underwater exploration with the Japanese, working with the Egyptian authorities behind the scenes in so many ways, looking at the multidimensional aspects of what is there in terms of our previous human history and ancestry if we are going to understand our cosmic origins. Once we know our identity, we will know our origins and we will know our destiny because they tie together. That we are humans in a universe teeming with life. We are one of many experiments, and we now have the opportunity to graduate, we call, into a new phase of conscious evolution where we become cosmic citizens in this vast creative experience of life.
Right, and we have looked at, we've been to Tiwanaku as well as Teotihuacan, but specifically Tiwanaku in the area of Bolivia many times, and the whole idea is that they really had a scientific culture. One of the things they discovered there was they found when NASA was flying over looking at the site that there was these square kind of plots like you would find in an agricultural field, and they were wondering how this could ever happen because it's so high up that you don't think that any kind of, significant agriculture could grow. But actually they found out that they used a type of greenhouse effect, and that allowed plants and crops to grow. They had a type of water in these plots.
Water reservoirs.
Yeah, so it's very, very interesting. Definitely a sophisticated culture, not a primitive culture just marking in caves or something like that, but a sophisticated agricultural existence. And, of course, when you look at the not only Tiwanaku, but the Puma Punka right next to it, I mean, very, very sophisticated structures and construction.
Well, there's a story about after the flood at the top levels of the mountains emerged, and that's when they started doing agriculture up high, and then gradually things, receded over time, and they crept down. So that's another reason why they started up high, because that was what was cleared from the mud, the muck, and everything that's going on there. I have a question. Do you have a question?
Well, you've got a lot of other Aquarians.
Yeah, we have a couple other people who want to ask you questions. We have Karen Christine Patrick, who is one of our co-hosts here on Aquarian Radio. And Karen, would you like to ask Desiree and JJ any questions?
Oh, yes. Well, first of all, this was the first I'd heard about Kennewick Man. I'm originally from Washington State, so that was a good tip. I'm going to follow up on that. That's fantastic. But I live now in New Mexico and recently got out to Chaco Canyon. And, when you're talking about the story of the indigenous, they were incredibly more sophisticated than, what the brochure says when you visit, the Puebloan cultures. And they had the map of Orion. I believe Gary David has done that research, where the map of Orion is represented by the various pueblos and villages. So they had definitely sky awareness. And I was just wanting to know what comments right off the bat that you have about the Chaco culture. They say Anasazi, but that probably wasn't their own name for themselves. Just have that as a question.
Right. We've been there. We visited. It's very, very great. Yes, there's a lot of alignments. People think of Chaco as just being that, like, a couple of the center circles, but that's not true. They had streets, literally pathways that go miles north and south. Then they've also looked at how the entire structure of Chaco has alignments. It has every phase of the moon between the buildings. It has also in a cave like almost like a spiral circle that also showed different types of time and seasons. Amazing what they've done. So it's not only the sun, the moon, but also the stars. And it's not just one building, it's the entire complex. And there is a documentary, I can't find the name right now, that explains the entire structure.
Redford was the narrator.
Yeah, amazing. We used to show that to some of our students. Fantastic structure. And one of the most interesting things is when they did the archaeological work there, they found out people did not live there. It was a pilgrimage place. That's also fascinating because it was huge. It's big. And the fact that they could see that, you can tell when people have lived there or if it's pilgrimage, and they said no. From what they've completely seen, it was only pilgrimage.
So we have
worked
a lot of work
with
the Hopis.
It's not just for the people, for the Earthlings to remember the way to the stars, but it might even be like a street sign for ETs that are coming in to the area. It could, like Mars, some of the researchers are saying stuff like that, or like airplane signals around our airports.
Yes, I agree with your view. As some of your listeners may not know, I was the first person to release documentation in 1973 of the pyramid structures on Mars, the grids in the Elysium Quad Triangle of major and minor pyramidal formations that are too regular and too perfect to be the result of surface materials that would be accumulated by the Martian winds. And this was later confirmed by the Russian test pilot and astronaut Pavel Popovich and his wife Marina. When I met with them in the 1980s, there was a clear indication that we were being prepared by our findings in outer space, namely on our sister planet Mars, to see the connections with similar pyramidal grids in Central and South America, as well as in Egypt, that would suggest that these were beacons or maps, so to speak, that were left behind to remind us occasionally throughout the centuries that we were spaceborne intelligence waking up on Schoolhouse Mother Earth, beginning to find our lessons of evolution, connecting us with the star cultures, or what the indigenous call the star nations.
If we're going to relate that to also South America, you find in the area of Nazca, were not only the interesting animal shapes and forms, which seem to be also, as you were mentioning, signals for ET contact. But you find now sophisticated, almost they're spirals, and people think that they're actually wells, but very, very sophisticated wells then being built for people to live in these remote desert areas. So there was significant intelligence, whether it was from contact or from people who actually came down and landed and taught the people the art. And of course, you find that in Babylonian myths that you have the people that came and taught humanity different things like agriculture or even warfare, both out in Babylon.
I wanted to give John Polk the chance to ask you a question real quick. John, are you there? Do you have a question or comment on her talk?
I am. I have both, actually. So I'm going to be at Contact in the Desert with one of my close friends who's listening right now. His name is Eric at Awakening Man on Twitter, who's a co-host to my show. But we're going to he's going to pick me up in LAX on Thursday before the conference starts and then drive out to Joshua Tree. So I'm on the website right now, and I was on it earlier today, and Karen gave me a call earlier today, and we were talking about you, actually. And I said, I went onto the website, and their workshop and their intensive is sold out already. So, the lecture, if you get the full pass, which everybody should do, and look into these workshops, look into these intensives, because you can learn so much more, especially being up close and personal with these dynamic speakers who've been in the industry for 40-plus years, Anyway, so the lecture, Preparations for Direct Engagement with ET Realities. That sounds fun right off the bat. And then the workshop, Outing, the Alien Technology of George Van Tassel and the Integration. And the intensive is largely the same thing, but the workshop and the intensive are both sold out already. But, of course, if you have the full-on pass, you can at least attend the lecture, which, now that we're interviewing you now, I more than want to do. But a lot of the research that we've been talking about tonight, it kind of leads me back to forbidden archaeology and Michael Cremo, and at least according to Michael Cremo, and he's been out there for a long time also, but he states that he has an artifact that was intelligently crafted artistically that was found in North America, and it was dated to be 2.8 billion years old. So let's extrapolate the human creation story, and let's say that the few 100,000 years becomes a few million years, becomes a few 100 million years, becomes billions of years. And I've posed this argument before, and Dr. Rita, who we've had on this network before, she said, well, you don't know that artifact was carved by actual Homo sapiens like we are today, but it was carved by some sentient being that had intelligence, which had artistry already in its mind. Otherwise, it couldn't have created something so artistic. So I was curious. Please talk about your lecture, the workshop, your intensive, but also forbidden archaeology and the potential that artifact is in fact intelligently created 2.8 billion years ago.
Well, thank you. Yes, and Dr. Jack and I will both respond. First of all, I hope everyone comes to Contact in the Desert. It's a great gathering of people, again, mid-May. It really ends up with about 3,000, maybe even this year 4,000 people. Our workshops this time, last time we did one that was on site, but and one that was off site at the Integratron is what it's called. And Dr. Hurtak in the 70s actually was teaching at the university down there in Southern California. I was actually his student at the time, so we've known each other since the 70s. And he used to take people out to the Integratron and to the diner that George Van Tassel, who lived very close to Joshua Tree, used to have an opening every Saturday, Sunday. He and his wife would be out at this diner which they owned, and then George Van Tassel would have contact from time to time, even since the 50s, with extraterrestrial levels of intelligence. And there was a giant rock literally, it's a huge one-piece rock that he initially even lived underneath the ground in for a while, but then he built his own house nearby and the Integratron. And he would allow us to go underneath the giant rock and to do our classes and gatherings and stuff. So it was great. And so in honor of George, who we both knew very well back in the 70s, we've been taking people, and the people who own the Integratron, a group of, I think it's 2 sisters and their family, have been allowing us to go there because it was done, the Integratron was built, it's like a second-floor dome structure, almost looks like an observatory, but ultimately the top part was supposed to spin. It doesn't spin at this point. He never got it completely to work before he died. There's references that he was just about to start it, and then his place got, robbed because they didn't want him to do it. But it's supposed to be a health and healing place that people could go in and literally heal their bodies. This is information he got in terms of how to build it from extraterrestrial contact. So that's my part, but I hope people do come to our own open seminar or class, a gathering, whatever you call it there, which is Saturday morning in the sanctuary, I believe.
Right. George Van Tassel was a maverick engineer who worked with Howard Hughes, the great thinker, inventor of Hughes industry, who found an abandoned airstrip where he was able to have, as it were, meetings dealing with extraterrestrial subjects, also including spiritual philosophy, what he called the Council of Seven and other levels of cosmic intelligence. But I'll wait until we get there to expound this. A film documentary is being put together on his life, and this will explore some of the unusual aspects of his work that the public doesn't know. But I had an experience there in 1978 with a group of colleagues from the University of California, Irvine, at night, and we were near the Giant Rock area. We didn't have any technology with us at the time. I wish we had cameras, but as we were walking around the Giant Rock area, a small reddish sphere appeared, very much like the tail light of that famous series of events in Steven Spielberg's movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where at the blockage areas of a highway, a extraterrestrial ship goes by, and then a smaller vehicle comes in the tailwinds of that. That type of event took place there at Giant Rock. And so I am conscious of the fact that although George Van Tassel was decried as a person who was simply in some type of altered state, there were physical contacts that he and others had. And so I'm really looking forward to this event happening at the Integratron with Desiree, my wife, and other colleagues.
Yeah, we pretty much use it as a time for meditation, to get the sound vibrations that he also had built into the system, certain resonance patterns. And we only on the Monday do we go out to the Giant Rock, which, by the way, a group of people, I believe it was like about 15 years ago or more, had gone there realizing that the planet was on the verge of significant change, and said, if something's going to happen, if the planet's going to survive, only a small part of the rock will break off. If the planet's not going to survive, the whole rock. And it's a huge rock. I mean, I don't even know the dimensions of it, really. It says
7 stories high.
Yeah, 5,800 square feet, something like that, is just what the ground it covers. And as it turned out, only a small part of the rock supposedly was broken off by some lightning that took place. And this just took place, like I said, about 15-some years ago. So I guess the planet's going to be around for a little bit longer. Thanks for that. And
so the bottom line is we must rethink our philosophy and our practical sociology, that we will have an opportunity to have scientific trade-offs with other civilizations in the next few years, I believe, to counterbalance the negativity that we're being bombarded with through the national media, which plays up violence, war, a culture of death, and really the whole sense of denying the powers of the mind, higher states of consciousness, and we will call spiritual technology to reach out to other dimensions of intelligence. We illustrate this in our new book called Mind Dynamics in Space and Time with Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, a famous mathematician, where we go into declassified documentation by the government scientist who's working behind the scenes for 40 years on a linguistic set of symbols of making contact. So can you repeat the question again, because we didn't have all of the data stream here. We've got a problem with our phones not being as clear as they could be. Would you repeat the second part of the question?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, what my question was Michael Cremo, going back to his, let's say, VHS tape, showing how old that it is, not even on DVD when I originally saw it when I was a kid, but Forbidden Archaeology, and he speaks of an artifact that he has from North America that was, it was clear that some kind of intelligent, sentient species, not necessarily of Homo sapien, but of some kind of intelligent being, artistically crafted this artifact that he got his hands on, and it was found in North America, and supposedly, according to him, that it was dated to 2.8 billion years ago. So, new research, Brad Olson, I interviewed him a couple nights ago. I think he was on Aquarian last night. He spoke of a new discovery that says, well, North America has now been redated to over 100,000 years ago. But according to Michael Cremo and this artifact, that there was intelligent life on the North American continent dating back to 2.8 billion years ago, if you want to go by the dating of this artistically crafted, ornate artifact that he found, and he talks about it in his video called Forbidden Archaeology. So that was the question, and what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, thank you. Actually, we do know Michael a little bit, not super well, but we've had lunch with him on several occasions and lectured with him. And it's interesting that one of the artifacts that he's cited for is actually 2.8 billion years old, but it's not found from North America. It's actually found from South Africa, and at least in terms of what we know. And these are these small spheres. We actually are, they were found in an area of South Africa that we well know because we've actually worked in South Africa since about 1979. And we actually have one of those spheres. And what's interesting about the sphere is that it rotates. They found
under its own power.
Under its own power. So they found this out because they had it in a museum, and that they had put some markings on it, and then by the time they went back and looked at it later on, the markings had moved.
So it was inside of a glass case, so no human subject could touch it.
And so I think that really is probably more, it's in the area of Klerksdorf. It's called the Klerksdorf spheres, and like I said, we have one of those. I guess there's some marbles similar to that, maybe. That's what he's also saying in Utah. I'm just looking at some data here, but that the Hopis used to play with in some of the games with the marbles, and he's making a connection between those spheres and that in South Africa. So I think that's probably what you're talking about. Probably not really bones or something like that, but these magnetic artifacts, and the fact that they are perfectly round looks like someone actually made them. And
well, first of all, they have an equatorial line around the outer rim of the stone that looks like a capsule, and I had NASA analyze one. They broke into it, and there was powder inside this capsule. There are no magnetic properties, which then would not explain why they
rotate. Yeah.
Why they rotate on their own power. But again, this is an anomaly. Could be tied into other factors in terms of geomagnetic forces we have yet to understand. Well, the natives of the Zulu tribe believe that this is one of the key factors of visitation from visitors who wanted to leave behind what we would call a space capsule that we would eventually analyze and understand where we were headed as a human civilization. Again, the Zulus, like other peoples, believe that there was once a civilization on the Mars that was destroyed, and those who survived made their way to this planet. And hence there's similarities in myth and legend, and even in some of the architectural designs, and certainly the emphasis upon the grid points that cover Mother Earth. At these grid points, you will find these strange artifacts that Cremo and others are alluding to.
Well, we've worked a lot in South Africa, and we have friends that live just down the way from this interesting cave that has recently been uncovered, and it uncovered another species called Homo naledi. And they believe that this is also something like just, I think, 2 million years ago, not billion, but 2 million years ago, that they actually buried their dead. And it's a whole different species. And I think that's what we're coming up with now on planet Earth, that, you have the Neanderthals, and I believe it's Ancestry 23 or 23 Ancestry, that one of the experts from the Neanderthal studies has joined their group. And when you do your test, you can come up with the fact of whether there is Neanderthal ancestry in your own genes. And so that's one of the markers that they're looking for. Obviously not everyone has it, but there are some because there was interbreeding they've discovered. Then also you have the Homo florensis, and you also have the Homo naledi, and there's many others, but these are all living somewhat simultaneously with some of the earlier races on this planet.
In fact, your girlfriend, when she had her genetic chart put
came
together, realized she was, to her surprise, she had a little bit of Neanderthal ancestry.
Yeah, but anyway, so it's amazing what we're coming up with now, and of course these do go back hundreds of thousands of years. But I have to say what they did come out with in the New York Times and Nature magazine for this 130,000 years ago in San Diego with the mastodon bones, showing that there might have been an arrangement made by man. They didn't find anything, I think, of human origin, but just the way the bones were arranged seemed like that they had been taken and used by, some sort of intelligent species.
And I saw Michael Primo's presentation a few years back, and I don't remember it 100%, but I thought he was alluding to some kind of bones or a giant or a skeleton or something. But we'll have to give him a call and find out what that was about, what he actually was talking about, billions of years old. I wanted to pass this to Dr. Lesson next, but I just wanted to, it would be so interesting to storyboard all this, what happened when, and get all the different researchers to correlate their information and do a symposium. I love Contact in the Desert and all these things where we come and present, but is there any kind of effort of coming together and connecting the dots and correlating all of our research and to make sense out of the ancient past and to the modern times and up to what is yet to come?
Well, probably not going back as long as we've been talking, in terms of 100,000 years ago, but we do want to advertise, if we can, also another conference the weekend afterwards, which is Memorial Day weekend, called Cosmic Origins, and this is in Sedona, Arizona, and it has some really amazing people. Dr. Robert Schock, who Dr. Hurtak and he, as well as with
Boris Said, worked with in Egypt.
Yeah, and Robert Bevell will be there talking about his new book, and he has a new theory on the capstone of the Great Pyramid, so this is exciting. Ourselves as well. William Henry will be joining us. William's kind of, followed up on a lot of these situations before, and it goes back past, present, and future. And then a good friend of ours who's a Zuni we'll say specialist. He is Zuni. His name is Clifford Mahuti, and he will be joining. And he has a lot of knowledge of the ancient Zuni, which is really similar. He's also familiar with Chaco Canyon. So this will be May 26th to 28th. It's called Cosmic Origins, and it's in Sedona, Arizona. I hope everyone can join us there as well. You can actually do both. One does not conflict the other.
So the first conference, Contact in the Desert, will give you the whole world landscape, and you'll have a plethora of speakers, maybe 40, 50 of the top. And then the following weekend, you'll specialize with reference to Latin America and Egypt, the combination between the two. We've explored both areas extensively. We're the only ones who had permission of the Egyptian authorities to do the music acoustical physics test, and we will have an opportunity to share some of our new research that many of our listeners have not seen or heard about on the physics and the mathematics that show clearly a higher hand of intelligent design.
Yeah, but most of our talk will be in the last 12,000 years, even though when you look at Yanaguni, some people were putting that back as much as 36,000 because there was really a major, we'll call it flood, or what we have here is sea level rise. It seemed like at some point that the sea levels were much, much lower at one point and then much, much higher at another point, depending on how much ice was at the poles. And when you look at lower, we've been working with some people in Australia, which, of course, what they found with North America is nothing but putting the Aboriginals down there about 60,000 years ago. And probably they've now traced some genetic linkage between the Aboriginals of Australia and some of the indigenous people of South America. And what's interesting about that is it does coincide with some of our philosophy that at one point the water levels were lower, and it didn't take that much. I mean, even though you had to go in a boat, but you could go the area of Southeast Asia, Australia, to Tahiti, to Easter Island, which was probably bigger at the time than it is today, to South America. And there seemed to be a current that would take you there certain times, and then a reversing current that would, Thor Heyerdahl found this, that would bring you back at another time. So you could go between, we'll say, the Southeast Asian area and South America. There probably was two different migratory routes, one in the north and one in the south.
Dr. Lesson wants to ask you something or say something. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was so far back, I don't know if I.
That's okay.
But anyway, in one of the scenarios that I was following, the Draco Federation sent a comet with a core in which they could guide the thing, going after the Lyran refugees from particularly the Atlans, who had settled a planet called Maldek, which was next to Jupiter. And the Maldekans saw them coming, and they sought refuge underground with the Mars. And the Martians also had some shielding, too. And so later on, the Maldekans did land, according to Swerdlow and others, in the Gobi Desert and other places to help in the war against the Dracos on Earth. So that's all relating to some allusion earlier about how people said, look, some of these folks, humanoids, came from Mars. So I was just relating to that smaller point. That's all.
Yeah. Do you have, we're going to a Mars Moon conference in Mobile, Alabama next weekend, and we're connecting the dots to the Moon and the Mars. We know that there's interaction between many of the planets in the solar system, but there's the Moon Mars Anomaly organization on Facebook. They focus on, what the different what's the different rovers. The rovers are collecting in the images from all the different missions to the Moon and Mars, and so there's a great deal of evidence that there's life on Mars and the Moon, and it's all related to the recent history of Earth, probably 450, 500,000 years on forward. What does your research tell you about the connection between the Earth, Moon, and Mars?
Well, first of all, as I said a few minutes ago, I was the first person to release the official documents from the Mariner 9 probe of 1972-1973 in my book, The Keys of Enoch, in 1973, showing clear pictures with the actual numbers of the documents of the Mariner B data frames of these major and minor pyramids, massive, hundreds of times larger than the pyramids, the Great Pyramids of Egypt. So, I've been very much involved with this. Unfortunately, scientific publications would not accept my work. Back in the 70s, I had to go to Europe and South America, where the scholars, the geologists, the planetary scientists were more open-minded. And we do know from research that was done behind the scenes back in the 1980s from engineers at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Los Angeles, connected with Caltech, and those connected with Stanford Research Institute here in Northern California, that the documentation, the raw footage, was analyzed by a group of freethinkers, those who had no bias, and after all of the information was presented, they came away with the realization that there had been life previously on Mars that was capable of doing the terraforming, or in some fashion an extrasolar intelligent source that would have been momentarily on the surface of Mars to explain these interesting landforms. It's interesting also that the Russians agreed with our research when we presented this in Europe some years ago. that they simply reversed the official explanations that there could not be intelligent life on our sister planet Mars. They have suggested to the contrary, that all of these major features were above the waterline as postulated for these ancient areas on the Martian surface tens of thousands, if not millions of years before. So the information is right in the NASA files. If we reprocess this information openly in the world commons of information on a university level, I'm sure new evidence will suggest that Mars has gone through several cycles of vast climate change when the atmosphere was lost, the planetary surface dried up, and those who were capable of technology, I'm told, by the indigenous I've talked to in South America and Africa, made their way to our planet, Mother Earth, as we now call it.
Right. So I think like our planet, that where the water levels have changed, there's now confirmation that where they thought that these channels on Mars were not water. Now it's confirmation they were water, that Mars actually had probably more water than even the planet Earth does today. So when you go back to that, you can see that there was a vast change that's taken place.
I would suggest you take the Keys of Enoch with you to the next conference on Mars or planetary evolution, or at least go to our website, keysofenoch.org, where we have several articles and books on the subject that are available, including futurescience.org, where I have an article published from the 1990s regarding a reassessment of the Martian question of life and why we should take a second look seriously at areas such as the Elysium Quadrangle.
Have you guys been hassled because you're saying things that are contrary to the truth embargo that our clandestines put upon us?
No, actually, we don't get involved with that. We've put the stuff out so long ago, and from the 70s, that for the most part, it's really more confirmations that have been coming up that people have acknowledged us for. So
originally, we were stonewalled, which is why I had to go to other countries to get our material published. Some of films do refer to our work, but by and large, it's just a handful of specialists who have connected the dots, who recognize that we are, we say, in a unique situation now of taking a second look at the data files and realizing that officialdom has postulated a different cosmology, that Mother Earth was the only one of intelligent life until a decade or so ago, when people began to accept the reality of exoplanets like ours. It's hard to believe. The Keys of Enoch said in 1973 that our sun was a variable star. This has been proven in the last few years. In 1973, they laughed at us.
And actually, I think it was 94, NASA actually almost used the same quote. I mean, they just did it on their own. They said the sun is a variable star. But the Keys of Enoch had said that in the 70s. Not that they were quoting one from the other, just that it was that way. So, you know, there's many things going on now that are just, we say they're all confirmations of the Keys of Enoch. And I think people are starting to recognize the importance of the Keys of Enoch that many people had read in the 70s and didn't understand. I tell people, go back now. It's very, very clear. It's very understandable because our science has evolved. And that's really the purpose. Dr. Hurtak had a unique experience, and he was told that our science would evolve to the point of an understanding, and that this information is being given to all of us, humanity, so we are prepared for contact. Because really in the 60s and 70s, we didn't understand it. We didn't understand the genetic codes. We didn't understand the astrophysics. We didn't understand the history of the planet. But, you know, these things are all coming to pass. So we're more excited about the changes in the information coming forth, and whether it's social media or wherever that's coming out with this information. But even Nature magazine saying possibility of 130,000 years ago, man wasn't, or not man, but some sort of primitive humanoid information was there in San Diego. I mean, that's an amazing find that just came out this week.
We have to get beyond the doomsday philosophy that this is a game only of one planet. If we keep our eyes and ears and heart beating, we will see really the transformative side of how peoples from all parts of the world are waking up into a great consciousness shift, that we are part of a transformative energy surge, connecting the pieces and working towards a realization that we will eventually graduate from Schoolhouse Mother Earth to the University of the Cosmos. We're very close to understanding our destiny in space, I'm very thankful that we have good people like you and this program that is reaching around the country, if not the world, showing that there's a higher blueprint that we must identify with, which has been always the hope and the aspirations of the indigenous and the shall we say, the mind locks of intellectual history are being opened now to the cosmic side of consciousness that unites all of us.
Right. So are we in the ascension process that's been, bantered around for many 20, 30 years, the ascension process, the different yugas, where we are in time space? Your topic on the presentation, the one that's open to the general public, that buy tickets to contact the desert, is direct engagement with extraterrestrial and ultra-terrestrial realities. And ET contact is all over the world. What are the top investigators saying on why they are coming to Earth? What makes them different from us? How do they compare to cosmic angelic beings, which we have been speaking about for thousands of years, and et cetera? What are ultraterrestrials? Who are they? Who's coming here now, and what's their agenda?
Unlike extraterrestrials, ultraterrestrials are multivalent. In other words, they have the capacity to express a number of meanings whose continuity is not obvious on an ordinary level of material experience. They are in the spiritual realm of what the ancients would call the avatars, or the angelic, or the superminds, that are able in a non-physical way to circumnavigate throughout the universe and occasionally manifest themselves in energy bodies.
Right, so we can classify the extraterrestrials being mostly third, fourth being time, fifth or sixth dimensional reality. So they can manifest through walls and things like that. But that higher reality, and Dr. Hurtak tells people it really goes up to the 24th dimension, that, you have these energy forms, or what we call ultra-terrestrial beings. And in reality, we feel we ourselves are evolving not only into cosmic citizenship, but some of us, and that's based on some of our new book called Mind Dynamics, to be able to use the mind in new ways that people had ignored for centuries. Although when we work with the indigenous people, you find that they actually can communicate through, we'll say, telepathy, if one wants to use that word, or they can, be in your mind, in your head, so to speak. Like extraterrestrials actually can be in your head as well. So, right. They function differently than we, but not necessarily, because we're starting to be able to learn how to function. We actually have that ability. My friend who worked for the Peace Corps, she said, you go to the really native peoples that had lived in Africa, and they all have that ability to be in your head and to know what you're thinking and to communicate without words. And we found this also with the people we work with in Brazil, the tribe that we work with there. And it's our nature. We've just forgotten to use it. And so now with the study of remote viewing, which is what our new book is about, Mind Dynamics in Space and Time, it shows that we can do that. And I tell people they do it all the time when they're thinking, before they pick up their cell phone when it's ringing, think of who is calling you and use that power to know who is calling you. Once you start developing that, you start using it for many, many things. You start using it for remote healing. You start using it for being able to kind of a little bit know the future. It doesn't mean like the future 4 years from now, but the future like a month from now or even a day from now, what you should be doing. You can remote view time as well as you can remote view space. So this is some of the stuff that we feel we're developing as a species, but we have to work with it. We have to experience it first.
So again, we want to repeat this to our listeners.
Go ahead.
The book is called Mind Dynamics in Space and Time, published by the Academy for Future Science,
which is our organization.
It's over 650 pages of scientific documents, drawings, and illustrations of how Desiree and I work with a top mathematician,
Elizabeth Rauscher,
who had no information at all where we were in Egypt, under the ground, in the tunnel system. It could identify this simply through the power of visualization. This was a technique we believe the ancients of the human race had, and the indigenous elders still practice. Remote communication, remote healing, remote viewing, all of this is part of what in the New Testament is called the gifts of spirit, or the divine aspect of the mind, which traditionally was there but was lost and, shall we say, marginalized by the advancement of science in Western Europe.
And for your readers, actually, we've developed this even more, according to Dr. Hurtak's information, especially from the 70s, is that we've created a book also called The Over Self Awakening, because we feel that really our own potential is really to be in a light body. And then we have a higher self that really directs the physical form. I liked one of your earlier speakers said, I'm a multidimensional being taking a mono dimension, and that's really true. That's exactly what our book Over Self Awakening is all about. So we see that we have this really greater potential that most people have ignored.
Right, and I think a lot of its life's been shut off is because of the programming that we are not supposed to believe in these things until we don't believe it. We believe it. We're taught in school. But many of us are rising and going beyond that. And the contact experiencers are experiencing this telepathic communication. And I'm constantly in contact. And it's not really in languages or words. It's in concepts. You communicate the entire concepts. And so it's a different way of experiencing existence, but it's totally capable. If I can do it, anybody else can do it too. Sasha, you have a question?
Well, it's just that my colleague Russell Branger has said that, if we have already delegated so much of our information to artificial intelligence, and the major artificial intelligences are talking to each other, and that if you really look at everything as being way beyond random, and that there is a structure, that you have to conclude that perhaps we're moving toward the purpose of the suffering that this planet has is to stimulate us to the technological ability to create a singularity where we can actually have a machine that figures out how to stop polluting and warring and have free energy and get rid of the Illuminati and stuff like that. What do you think of that?
Well, this is the viewpoint of Ray Kurzweil and others in Silicon Valley who have taken that approach that you described so well. We feel that there's a dialectic or a struggle between those who want to go in the way of robotics and a robotic chip inserted into the human brain, controlling the proclivities and the predilections of the human, versus those who believe, as Desiree and I, that there is a higher pathway to evolution through consciousness expansion, which we illustrate in two of our books. Again, this business of turning over the human brain to robots is very dangerous. We believe from the mythological records that this may have been one of the reasons Atlantis was destroyed. It turned its brain over to its keepers or its thinkers, robots in charge of civilization. I think the indigenous have been able to survive with great wisdom without robots, and I think if we look at the human brain inventing supercomputers, we should stay one step ahead of the computer chip if all possible.
Right. We're definitely at the point of having a choice to make, whether we focus on letting technology do everything for us or whether we look at developing ourselves spiritually as well, of course, and moving into really the potential of being light energy beings. But I do believe that we have the potential, as you were indicating, to receive the pictures or the images to create free energy devices, but there seems to be some limitations on this planet for various reasons of why we haven't done that, and one of which really may be the very fact that it may be that it could be used for negative purposes and they're not so interested in us misusing technology. One of the energy technologies we're purporting right now because of our work in Egypt, and hopefully we'll have this book ready at least for Cosmic Origins, if not for Contact in the Desert, is that we believe the ancients actually used a simple technology called saltwater batteries, which are sadly a company that was from Carnegie Mellon just went under because I think they put too much money into the economics startup company and not enough into just letting it go and getting people to buy it. But you can take simple water and salt water together with a very simple membrane and a few electrodes and create a battery storage device much like you would have for storing solar energy and be able to keep that energy going, all through the night. So there's a lot of potential. We've done a lot of work. In fact, Toby Grotz and Dr. Hurtak and Pat Bailey
Lockheed.
Yeah, back in the 90s, 80s, and 90s, actually did research all around the world looking at the technology that is available. We're very familiar with all the new technologies that are available. And, there's a great potential that we all have in making this possible.
So we don't have to depend on oil. Certainly the Egyptians were not dependent upon oil. The Mayans weren't dependent upon oil, and yet they had very superb structures of hydraulics that still defy the human logic. So putting this into overview, we must connect the dots between alternative energy sources, higher consciousness, the ability to look at the new astronomy, cosmology, and the ability to think positively. So we work in harmony with nature and what we will call the higher evolution. Otherwise, we'll simply degrade ourselves more and more towards the mechanistic, the technological, and we've seen what's happened in the 20th century. The technological side has been against nature and against the balance of Mother Nature, with the loss of 200 species, we were told, per day by colleagues of ours at the United Nations.
Right. We want to encourage people to look at the Internet on the topic of die-off. That's DIEOFF, die-off. And you can see what's really happening on this planet. That's all you have to look at. You don't have to talk about environment. You don't have to talk about anything. If people just go on and look at die-off of what's happening to animals around the planet. And this is called to our attention by our friends in Chile. And some of it is nature, there's no doubt. Some of it is caused by other things that we're doing to the environment. A major thing is the red tide because of the imbalance of the temperature that's taking place, especially in off the coast of Chile. You have really, hundreds and thousands of animals dying in different ways from pollutants and from temperature changes and things like that. So some major things, and we feel that's why the ETs are coming back. They've been here for thousands of years, but coming back to help us get a better grip on what's taking place on the planet and our next phase of evolution.
On the other hand, there are other categories such as ITs, that is to say those that have been identified that seem to be terrestrial based. So it's not a question of people coming from outer space, but those existing in other dimensions of consciousness that we don't recognize with our scientific logic that are here, as we say, the groundkeepers of the balance of Mother Earth. And every so many thousands of years when things get out of hand, when the human race uses knowledge the wrong way, it has to pay a penalty. So we are looking at the upside as well as the downside, and we're asking our viewers and those who are seekers to place their emphasis on the upside because there's more to gain than to lose in the coming changes of this generation.
So what can be done? What can we do to help support this effort to stop destroying these species at a rate of 200 a day? There seems to be solutions, and it'd be great if we could put some of those on the table. And I also want to give Karen and John one more chance to talk. So let's wrap this show up with some positive, on a high note. But Karen, I know you're over there with your hand up. She
knows me. She knows me. No, I was very excited for you to talk about singularity versus ascension. I'm going to be at that Mars conference in Mobile, Alabama, and I'm specifically going to talk about that. And the analogy I use is that we have these Paralympic athletes that have these cheetah legs. So there's a double amputee has these legs that are designed like a cheetah, and they're I don't know if they've exceeded or coming close to exceeding the speed that a human can run naturally with their legs intact. And so then the idea is, do we saw off our legs just so we can run faster with technology, And I say that's not a good idea because that's not really recognizing what nature built into us, what we're capable of, what is going on in nature that we don't have to fix. There's nothing broken in nature, really. It's running on its own steam for millions of years, and here we come tinkering with it. And that we, one of the things that I come from a technology background, and I grew up with the Internet, basically, and was involved in the early stages before we had the World Wide Web like we have now, was the idea that when I became aware of my contact base, I just compared it to cosmic Facebook. It's a situation where basically there already is a consciousness net that we can communicate with other beings, we can communicate with nature, spirits, we can communicate with ultra and intra-dimensionals, and that what the Internet is really is not something to take over, or give us some technology for us to become the Borg or anything like that. It's literally showing us information in its natural habitat. We're literally now looking, and when we look at virtual reality or virtuality and the underlying code, the source code, we're looking at the source. I mean, we're looking at how thought becomes matter, and that was a boost for us. That's not meant to turn us into robots all connected to the Internet and bumping into walls because we're having a download. It's for us to basically upgrade our thinking about how information works in nature. And when a species collects enough data through morphogenetic, information feeding back to that species' biomind, that it will adapt to its environment through epigenetics. It will adapt, and I think humans are about ready to have the big, adaptation because these people who want to kill us all off and think, that it's better if we just had 500 million humans and all that stuff. They're basically kind of messing with Mother Nature. They're messing with our ability as a species to upgrade and grow. And I think our other caretaker beings out there are going to make sure it happens. I used to be a very negative person. I'm a very positive person now because I see what's going on from a bigger context and from consciousness, levels. And I feel like the negative elements is very immature, and they're not looking at things from a holistic, higher mind kind of way. And so their doomsday messages, we should just get our minds off of that and think about what would be best for our children and children's children, just like indigenous people think for 7 generations from now. If I make a decision now, how will that affect 7 generations later? So I'm a very positive person. I got a chance to watch some videos of yours with Elizabeth Rosher and others, and I was really encouraged, and boy, I needed it this week. So thank you so much. But there's not really a question in there, just a comment.
I thank you so much. I think you've done a superb job. I completely agree with you. In fact, a friend of mine here in Silicon Valley was one of the engineers that helped shape the what we call the Internet highway connecting the University of California with the other universities back in the 60s and 70s, and then that was further developed in the 80s and 90s. So we have really the opportunity of a worldwide global university. We have the opportunity to find counterparts any place on the planet that can be in charge of positive thinking towards the environment, a new type of sociology that's positive, a new type of philosophy that's also positive, though has to come to connect with the futurism. Otherwise, the naysayers get the upper hand because many of these people look only at the pragmatic, the material, and they overlook the non-material, what we call the non-local aspect of what we find through consciousness expansion, that we can be in several places at the same time. And this was work done by the top scientists in the United States to a tune of $20 million here at Stanford Research Institute. And we describe this in great depth in our new book with Elizabeth Rauscher. So, again, what we can do, we can bootstrap a whole new psychology. We can find our counterparts worldwide at major universities throughout the world. We can link up with them. We can begin to have a local near embrace of economic and environmental resources rather than depending upon big corporations to carry only the load of what individual participants must do on a grassroots level.
Right. So we are the Academy for Future Science. That's the name of our organization, although our website's really, best website would be keysofenoch.org. But that we always feel that there is going to be a future, and science will be part of it. Of course, it's also the science of consciousness, which we want to emphasize. And remote healing, I mentioned earlier, is a key way. We don't have to go all the way to Chile to help some of the animals. We can actually help them with our greater love and understanding. We can also encourage the researchers in Chile and other places to go help them to get some ideas and ways of protecting them. I mean, there's many, many things we can do with the power of the mind. We feel that the other levels of intelligence, both extraterrestrial and ultraterrestrial, are actually feeding us the information to help planet Earth certainly to help ourselves and help our families. So we encourage people like Elon Musk, who came out with Tesla, Solar Cities, also SpaceX, who's trying to get us to Mars, so that much faster than if you had to wait for NASA or ESA or any of the other agencies. He's really on the ball to get us there. Or people like Elizabeth Rauscher, who really send energy around the world and do meditations on a regular basis. Meditation really helps the planet. Those that have studied TM or any other form of meditation know that you can literally change the consciousness of humanity by putting positive thoughts into this local mindset that we're all picking up on all the time. And it does seem sometimes like a losing battle. It seems like there's too much negativity out there, but if we stay with the positive flow, and the way to do that, which I think is very interesting, is through love. If we always can emanate that love for humanity, love for our fellow man, that neutralizes a lot of the negative mindset energies and puts it out into the positive.
The bottom line here is we want to build a university without walls. We want to reach around the world.
Which I think Aquarian Radio is doing, so we thank you all.
Right, programs like yours. We want to build a world commons through the Internet where we can exchange ideas and work on the basis of local economies rather than depend upon Big Brother to finance everything, and usually on his terms rather than that of the local population. And we want to bring higher ethics into science so that people have a view of science that is human-orientated rather than object-orientated. Until quite recently, most of the scientific programs and engineering programs are simply to build better machines, to better weapons of this or that, and to make constructs of the mind for the very few rather than for the many. And so we're interested in what we will call a more humanitarian aspect of future science, or science guided by consciousness. And to that event, and to that end, we have several websites throughout the world that you can tune into, our programs, our webinars, and see some of our new books that cover the spectrum of information from Egyptology to new findings in outer space with some of the former astronauts that we work with. So we're very excited about young minds in particular, and your program this afternoon, our time, really brings us into a joyous sharing of new information that we are building a new media, a media of information that's constructive rather than destructive, transformative rather than artificial, and working really with the aspect of the human heartbeat, some would call love math, or higher consciousness put into practice.
Love it, love it. I want to give John a chance to talk again. John, are you there?
Yes,
Hello, John.
I am, and yes, I'm with you. I wanted to reiterate the books that they have, the Book of Knowledge, The Keys of Enoch, The Overself Awakening, and Mind Dynamics. I'm sure that you have more books than that, but these are ones that are put on the bio on the Aquarian Radio website. And if you ever listen to any of these shows, you have to go to the website. You have to look at the bios. You have to look at the extended promos that we do for all the guests. And I don't do it myself. Janet and Karen do it, and they do a masterful job. As much information as the guests are willing to give us is pretty much everything that they'll end up putting on the site. And we're all about the guests on this show, and we're here to promote, the guests. We want to promote all your assets. It's important for all of us to disseminate this information for ourselves, but for everybody involved, especially the guests, because without the guests, there is no show. But one thing that you mentioned just by the title itself, the Overself Awakening, that kind of reminds me of the Oversoul in many facets, that our Oversoul, conceivably our Oversoul is so big that it cannot fit into this small human container that we have in the third dimension, that the actual majority of it is outside of our body because it is so large. Is it physical in nature? Well, no and yes. It's non-physical in nature, but it is a part of the omniverse and the universal God consciousness, and we're all part of the universal God consciousness. And since we're all part of the universal God consciousness, we're all a part of the same omniverse, and that's something that is overlooked because of religion, Religion divides us. It was meant to divide us. Language, religion, culture has all been meant to divide us. But the most important race on this planet that we all seem to forget is the human race, and we're all part of the human race. And when we can come to terms with that and hold hands in an allegiance together in the name of love and God, then we can conquer anything that is less than the light. But also we've been alluding to the multidimensional existence, which is a huge part of my whole life concept, is that I live within my own multidimensional self, and let's say selves through concentric lifetimes simultaneously. So as I vibrate in the third dimension right now in this physical container sitting on my couch, I'm way more than that in the whole, cyclical cycle of the omniverse. I'm actually coexisting within other concentric selves within myself, and I try to see through those eyes. I try to feel the feeling. I try to breathe the air. I try to go through all of my senses. And in another dimension, we may have more than 5 or 6 senses or different senses, since we're in a different dimensional reality. And I wanted to go that route and then also tie into your new film, The Gates of Light, which I have to figure has to allude to at least some of what I just talked about.
Very well said. It does, and it was co-produced with 2 Australian friends who are anthropologists. I highly encourage our audience to think about this. It's on our website.
Right. We actually have a series of videos. We have one called Merkaba, Voyage of a Starseed. It goes back to the 90s when we did that, because the Keys of Enoch talk about Merkaba from the 70s. The Light Body is one of our more popular videos, and then the more recent one is Gateways to the Light, which is really these amazing stargates that kind of open and move. And they're all meditation videos. We also have music. We've worked with Stephen Halpern, and we have lots of different musicians that work with us to just change the environment, change the atmosphere. You put it on in the background in your car, and you're like in a different state, because we're trying to really change consciousness. That's really our essence.
Again, we're here as world educators, investigators, futurists, and in the context of connecting the points, we've been very fortunate to work with some of the great indigenous leaders, and we represent some of 15 tribes from Brazil at the United Nations. And so our work is to open a voice of communication.
Right, but our main thing is to encourage people to really find their higher selves, as you said, our over self. And, of course, the book actually takes you through 72 different stages of doing that. But I liked what you said, John, is that, this is really our true essence. We're only really experiencing this temporarily down here, and we lose it all the time. We lose that connection. We believe even in some cases physical healing can come about when you bring that higher light essence over your physical body and you realign all the connections that you once had to the light. We feel we are really light beings, light bodies, and that's our true self. And when we use our higher nature, we're able to know what we're to do. And I think that's the most important thing. We don't just do things out of the emotional body or the rational mind, but we do things out of the collective wholeness, that universal mind, that omniscient presence that, wants us to move forward as a species, that wants humanity to really be more positive. And people are making a difference. We see this really all over the world, that people are reaching out to help the animals, to help humanity, to help really transform situations that are taking place that should be changed. I acknowledge even the Doctors Without Borders that are out there in Syria and Jordan. I mean, if we didn't have that kind of humanity, this place would be really horrible. So we all have to contribute in some way. It's almost like we just passed Earth Day a little while ago, but we all have to remember Earth Day every day and to do what we can in every moment of our lives to make this a better planet.
So rather than globalization, our emphasis is on peopleization. In other words, going to the historic sources, recognizing that all throughout history humanity has survived climate change, and that we're on the precipice of making a quantum change, but we also have to develop the educational tools in order to do that. And now with the breakthroughs on the internet, we have fantastic abilities through satellite technology to really catch up in many areas in a matter of a few years as opposed to many generations.
And we believe that the more we tune into that higher self, that omniscient presence, the more we will know how to help everyone next to us, whether it's our immediate family or the collective. So if that's the most important thing, to be of service. And when you seek to be of service, then the information flows, mostly through pictographs, as I think Janet has said, and you start seeing and knowing what you need to do at every moment. This is really where we all need to move into.
But a major question must be asked at this time: would the discovery that we are not alone in the universe shake the foundations of established belief in religion and science, or would it provide a source of wonder and celebration that we are part of an intrinsically bio-friendly universe? And we take the position that we're part of this bio-friendly universe, and that ultimately a new form of science and a new form of spiritual consciousness will emerge that will link and harmonize the two sides of the human brain, that which is the traditional three-dimensional and that which is the multidimensional, that which was traditionally the male-orientated dominant and that which is the female multidimensional. So our work with all cultures has been to work towards dialogue and experience on the levels of the pathways of consciousness, which is called in the Eastern tradition the 7 chakra levels of unfoldment, in the Western tradition the 7 seals of spiritual transformation and ascension. We believe that we're at this moment of being able to take a great leap towards a dialogue of ascension with our cosmic counterparts, or a great leap backwards by those who want to see only a negative game and work only for the benefit of the few at the expense of the many.
Dr. Lesson has a question.
It's my hypothesis that people like you, JJ, and you, Desiree, are ambassadors, that a great many of people like you, and I'm asking you, have you had face-to-face contact in 3D or virtual contact or mind meld with extraterrestrials or intradimensionals that you're aware of? How does your contact come for you personally?
Right. Well, Dr. Hurtak in 1973 had a unique experience January 2nd and 3rd, and he was literally connected with the work of Enoch and Metatron. This is on obviously not extraterrestrial levels, but what we call ultraterrestrial. And he was taken and shown a lot of these other realities, literally taken beyond this planet. So that's where he was given the 64 keys of Enoch, and then
cosmic roadmap.
Yeah, almost like Enoch. I don't know if you know the prophet Enoch. Way back, we'll say he was 7th in line from Adam, who was taken and shown certain things, and then brought back to the planet temporarily to write them down. So anyway, that's where all these conferences. Go ahead.
Called the stellar Enki. It's what in the Sumerian stuff, but it's the same guy. It's Enoch.
Enoch, yeah. Actually in Arabic, he's known as Idris. Anyway, that's just so basically this information, was written down in the 70s, and from then on, and of course there's still certain levels of contact that continue on, but we're looking at all the confirmations that have come about, like specifically the Isle of Flores having these hobbit beings, for example, which is a totally different species from us, and many other things. The connection of Orion and the Great Pyramid. This is why we connect with Bavel.
It actually was 20 years before Bavel made himself famous. But essentially, what this comes down to is a graduation we're going through. All of humanity will be going through a graduation. And the late Dr. J. Allen Hynek from Harvard University and from Northwestern University said that the people will be taken kicking and screaming into the future. I don't believe that we have to go kicking and screaming. I think there will be a transformation available for those who choose the higher path. That higher path is one of balance.
But again, he was told that all these areas, actually 64 areas of science, and that includes psychology and history and everything like that, will be moving into, we'll say, the new millennial understanding, so that we're prepared for contact, and this contact will come both in forms of ET contact as well as terrestrial or angelic contact, and that's the essence behind the experience he had back in the 70s.
So we've worked with the indigenous, and we have a film out on the life of Credo Mutwa, the famous Zulu shaman historian, that's now available on our internet website. Some of you might like to look at the East African traditions regarding contact with the higher dimensions of intelligence, as well as the cultural history that's so important, much overlooked, of course, for peoples of East Africa, that links us with Egypt and links us also with our planetary neighbor known as Mars. And more will be coming out as we are prepared, I think, for a culture shock, what ultimately will come out of the findings on Mars, not fossils that are only 6 centimeters long, but the realization that there are massive artifacts there that have to be looked at and cataloged in terms of life first on Mars and then later on planet Earth, because Mars was first of all in the Goldilocks zone, what is called that which was right for thermodynamic activities of evolution before it took place here on Mother Earth.
Right, but the intelligence we're really talking about, even the extraterrestrial, are much more vast and, of course, not limited to the solar system. We've worked with certain people that back in the 50s, they said the boys from Venus. That could be just a code word because, you never think Venus, which is the place of love, is a negative place. Or they could be existing in other dimensional realities. But we're really talking about much more vast star systems, whether you look at the ET experiences connected with Benny and Barney Hill from Zeta Reticuli, or what we're seeing in Egypt with both the Pleiades and Orion and Sirius, other types of technology showing us that these were significant places in the universe.
So we're almost out of time. Let's let Karen and John say one more thing, and then we'll finish the show with you too. Karen, are you there?
Well, yeah, no, I was just really thrilled to hear this and be encouraged that we're on the ascension track, kicking and screaming or not. I think I would love to see more move in the sciences to acknowledge these consciousness studies that have been going on for a really long time, and to stop fighting independent researchers who are finding out stuff. We have our conference in Mobile, Alabama, is independent researchers who've been looking at photos of Mars and finding anomalies. You should go to marsmoonspace.com to find out more about that. But because the scientists have bypassed, even looking at the photos in that way, it's literally been people who've taken it on as an avocation or a really intense hobby to find it, and that we're going to be all reporting. It's our 6th year of doing this, so there's been phenomenal finds of exactly the kind of stuff that you guys were talking about, and I think it's a very exciting time to be an Earthling on planet Earth, definitely, and thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for your great comments.
Yeah. John, your final word. Sorry, I'm rushing things along so we all get something in. Go ahead, John.
Okay, so real quick, I believe that Dr. JJ and Dr. Desiree, you mentioned that there's going to be a Skywatch at Contact. Are you going to be conducting it? Are you going to be part of perhaps a ceremony or anything to lure the gods to Joshua Tree? Last year, there was a number of UFOs that were seen by over 100 people. So if there is a Skywatch, I would definitely love to be a part of it, even if I'm just standing there as an observer, or if I could be part of the active seance, because I can help in that capacity. But yeah, tell us about the Skywatch, and did you know anything about the UFO sightings at Joshua Tree last year?
Right. Well, yeah, we're just doing the 2 Integratron, and then the on Monday, and a panel as well on with Jimmy Church and Robert Bavell and some other people there. I think Graham Hancock's part of that panel. And then also on the Monday outing, we'll go to Giant Rock. But none of these things are really in the evening. And I did notice from looking at Contact in the Desert, they do have two things. They are going to take some people out directly to Giant Rock. Now, everyone has to go in their own cars or a car that can at least manage dirt roads. So that's important for people to know. If you go to the Giant Rock, which one place for the Skywatch. And the other place, I know that they were doing it last year as well as they'll do it this year, going to a certain hill place at the center there where the conference is being held and look for UFOs. And that's, I think, where they saw them last year. So, yes, I think every night there's going to be people, sitting up on the hillsides out in the desert there, because it's a beautiful place, as everyone knows. People do camp there, or you go to the local hotels, whatever, but we encourage people to go do that, just to be out there at night. This was a place from the 50s that extraterrestrial vehicles were seen, had contact with George Van Tassel and others. He used to have, one of the reasons this is so cool is that in the 50s, George Van Tassel had thousands of people coming out to his Landers, it's called Landers, Landers area, and to the runway there, and that's where they would have their UFO conventions. So this is almost like an, ongoing George Van Tassel UFO convention. And so we encourage everyone to keep the spirit going, and hopefully the ETs will make themselves more and more known to all of us, because we're all getting ready for it. That's what's so exciting.
And so if I can just give a closing observation, I believe that humanity will take one of its greatest evolutionary jumps in the recognition of the existence, nature, and activities of civilizations in space, and let us move towards the declassification of all documents pertaining to not only the extraterrestrial but also the ultraterrestrial question. Let us be open-minded and never lose the humanistic vision of the brotherhood of man, unified with what the ancients called the brotherhood of light. Let us realize that we are all brothers and sisters in a fantastic universe, and that we're graduating from Schoolhouse Mother Earth to the University of the Cosmos. May we be blessed in this great transformation and ascension process.
Wonderful. I just wanted to add to what John said, to just answer him. Yes, there's a place you go out. It's hard to explain. When we get there, I'll show you where it is. Bring a good flashlight. That's all I recommend. And it does get chilly at night, even though it's really hot during the day. And go out there. If you have any night vision goggles, bring them along. They only have maybe a dozen, and there are several hundred people out there. So it does take a little while to get your turn. And also bring a laser pointer if you have one, because when someone sees a craft moving, then you all point your lasers to help everybody else see where it is. And we saw, when I was out there for just about an hour and a half this last year, probably saw about 30 craft. It was just an amazing event. Okay, Dr. Liston, your final words, and then we'll let the Drs. Hurtak finish.
I just want to thank you both for sharing with us. I'm insatiably hungry for information, and you got lots of it.
Okay, so back to you two. We only have a few more minutes. Take it away.
Yes,
wrap it up.
Please go to our website, keysofenoch.org and futurescience.org, and realize we have a library of information, fantastic films and music documents from some of the great composers in the world working with this whole new outreach of futurism and new education. And let us be blessed with the open-minded heart, compassion for all humanity, with a sense of great humility that we're waking up to our cosmic origin, and also that we will emerge truly as cosmic citizens if we balance the inner and the outer peace, the peace that passes all understanding, that we are but one of many tribes in the universal experiment of life. Let us be blessed as we take this great jump into the future.
And let us put away any energies of fear. I mean, mankind's been on this planet for a long time. The exciting thing is that we have the possibility of being in the universe for a long time. We think we are really doomed to perfection, as it says in the Keys of Enoch. And so there's no really limitations. We will be there. We will make the difference. We'll be part of the greater humanity. And our mind literally will be moved off of the spatial dimension into new realms.
With that, we wish all of you the best. with your tremendous outreach in the program of Aquarian, teaching, experience, and activation. May we go forward together in peace and harmony, as the ancients said, Pax et Vobiscum, Pax et Concordia, peace and harmony. That's the way to the future of humanity. Blessings to all, and thank you.
Blessings to you. Thank you. Much love and blessings and aloha.
Aloha
and,
to aloha.
And you've been listening to Aquarian Radio at AquarianRadio.com. Thank you. Aloha.
Medicine is one of the most difficult, fast-paced, yet rewarding paths you can take. You can set out on your own and navigate the student loans, the bureaucracies, and systems that define a typical medical career. Or you can apply for the U.S. Army's Health Professions Scholarship Program and launch yourself into a medical career like no other. Your tuition will be completely covered, and when you graduate med school, you'll learn from and work with some of the most elite minds in medicine. That's the Army difference. Learn more and apply today at goarmy.com/HPSB.